Hello, Charm City family. Welcome back to the C3 podcast. We are honored today to be joined by my dear friend and partner in crime, Greg Bruce. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Andrew. Hi, Michael. Nice to be here.
I haven't even started yet. Greg, tell me why you're not going to hell anymore.
The Lord got me. That's all I can say. The Lord got me.
Amen.
Nah,
Has my,
yeah,
have
just
I been
just
in
very
this podcast
blessed.
yet? Can you keep me out? Can you cut my video out of the podcast?
No, I mean, it's been a long time coming. It's just, it took a while for me to come around and actually believe who God really was. He's always been there. I'm the one that's kind of never really accepted it. So, and it took a lot, of lifetime to go through, but here I am.
So tell me, like, we'll get to the big moment later. But tell me, like, what led you to finding your way to C3, and what led you to where you are today? Because you'll talk to us frequently about the change you feel like you've gone through, how your wife even recognizes this and everything, and we're still praying for and working on your wife, and
Sure.
we're excited to see her come to service and one day give her life to the Lord. But in the meantime, like, what brought you through the stages that you went through to bring you to where you are today?
So, I guess we'll go back to the beginning. I grew up. I grew up in Delaware. Normal family. Mom, dad, brother, and sister. Everything was really good. Till one day it wasn't, and it was one of those things that at day after my sister's 7th birthday, my dad just left. He just left. I was 5, my brother was 3, so my mom was just kind of stuck with 3 kids, not knowing where to go. So luckily my grandparents were close by. They pretty much raised us. My mom worked all the time, and that's kind of where I got my beginning stages of kind of church. I would go with my grandfather on Sundays, but looking back on it now, my grandfather was like a 1 day a week Christian. So Sunday morning, it was, he would have his tie on and his jacket. He'd grab his Bible. He'd sit up front. He'd be singing the loudest. He'd be praising and doing whatever. And, as soon as we hit out that door, he was a different man until next week. So I had a really disfigured kind of view of what religion was in general. And I was just kind of made to go because he went, and my mom didn't want to leave us home, and that's kind of the way it was. And, my mom never went to church. My grandmother, she was kind of a closet Christian. She stayed at home, but very much into the Bible, watched a lot of things on TV. And, that's just kind of the way it was for the first, 14 years of my life. And 15, I kind of moved out. I kind of reconnected with my father a little bit later, and I kind of moved. I was very troubled, very, very troubled. So I was always in trouble, always, failing out of school and everything. And it was not a good life. I wasn't happy as a kid. I had nothing to look forward to. We were poor. You just kind of had to survive, and I didn't, at least for me, there was no God in my life. There was no God in general because I just didn't believe that concept. My sister, on the other hand, she's a couple years older than me. She became a Christian very, very young in her life, and is the same way today. And she's been to Charm City as well. She came when, I went through some stages there. But it just took me, I went to, a couple bad marriages. We're just rolling along in life. And, 30 some years later, it was just, there was no God, there was no church, there was no nothing. Just didn't believe it. Didn't see him working. And I felt like if there was a God, why why didn't he help me? Not realizing that I kind of had to call out to him. I kind of had to surrender to him, and he was always there. Like I said before, it just I was the one that wasn't reaching out, and yeah, it took a toll. It really took a toll on my life, and you know, things obviously eventually change, which is why I'm here. But there's just a lot of struggles, and I guess a way to sum it up is I felt like I was being punished by God because of the lifestyle I had led. You know, I was a very just selfish, egotistical, just had a lot of rage. There was just nothing positive in my life that I could say, you know, this is just who I am. You know, this is just, you're just going to have to deal with it. This is who I am. I'm not going to change. So, I mean, here we are.
So when did you stop going to church? Because you say like you went growing up a little bit.
Yes, growing
So
up, I went, and I grew up, the church I went to was a Baptist church, very, very structured, you know, very, you know, fire and brimstone, you know, wooden
Bless God.
pews,
King James.
Kim J, yeah. So, you know, as a
It's the
kid,
authorized version.
Authorized.
1611.
100%.
They say 1611. They only use the 1789. I'm just saying.
Good
So you
point.
started to.
So yeah, I mean that was a big turn off for me as a kid in general. And then when I was old enough to make my own decisions at about 15, I was just done. There was nothing in there for me. I got nothing out of it. I can't remember other than it was just a waste of time one Sunday. And that's the way it was for most of my life. I mean, Sundays were not about church. It was not about anything till, you know, I got older, and when I met my wife that I'm married to now, Maria, she kind of was just kind of hemming and hawing a little bit about wanting to go back.
Yeah.
She was going to another church, and I wasn't very receptive at first, but I started to be. And it became kind of a regular thing for about a year and a half. And I started to see things a little bit differently. But that particular church dynamic was a very big church. It just wasn't the right fit for me. So after about a year and a half, I just stopped going altogether. And honestly, I was in a even worse place than I was before I started going there. So, you know, after a year and a half of being what I would consider a relatively structured church, similar to beliefs to what we have, I was just in the downward spiral. Was even worse. So,
Why do you think that it got worse?
I think it got worse. The further I pushed away from God, the worse it got. And I think part of it was just me, right? I was just so stubborn and unwilling to see or believe or do anything. And I think part of it, in all honesty, was just God, like, you know, look, I'm here. You've kind of seen me to a degree, and you're just not ready. You have to be ready. You have to be ready.
And so after this time where you grew up in and out of church, left 16, there was like a big span of time between that.
Yeah,
and
a long
then there.
time.
So
Yeah.
what was your life like between that time of 16 and then when you finally came to church again? Like, what was your life like in between that?
So in between that, I was married twice. In between there, I had 2 kids. You know, raising them. I started my own business. Had my own company for 20 some years. So I was just very busy. I had a lot going on. You know, obviously just, you know, normal duties as family, but also business. So I stayed. It was all about work. I mean, I won't deny that work was a big part of my life, and I spent most of it there. So. It didn't really leave me much time for anything else, even if I had it. So, but yeah, and then it, you know, we fast forward to, you know, next thing I know, I'm 50 years old. You know, there you go. And that's kind of where things started in my walk. So.
Yeah, and so in that span, do you think that work was something that you were using to fill some of that pain from just your upbringing and things that happened?
I would say definitely. I've always been, even when I was a kid, you know, listening to my mom, she was like, you were a great kid up to 5 years old. When your dad left,
Yeah.
you tanked.
Mm.
And it's funny because I just talked to my mom today, and that came up when I was driving home from work, and she was like, "You definitely, you know, that took a lot out of you." And I knew at that point it was going to be a struggle for you for a lot of your life. But I was always very dedicated and focused on tasks and things that I was doing. So that became kind of my out. You know, I dove into work. I just loved working. I loved what I did. I loved just being challenged and being able to figure things out and just move on. And that left me fulfilled to a degree.
Mm.
You know, in life it left me fulfilled, but spiritually I had nothing.
Mm.
So.
It's crazy that you're still talking about it with your mom to this day. Because I think for a while, I don't know if you did this, but I feel like men especially, they don't like to acknowledge that those types of things affect them or hurt them, especially with issues with your family and with fathers. Like we like to be very tough and act like
Sure.
it doesn't bother us,
Sure.
but it really does.
100%.
And it comes out in those areas like working and trying to fill those voids. So I think it's a good testament. Like, were you always that open to talking about that kind of stuff with your mom, or is that more of a recent thing too?
Oh, it's definitely more recent. My mom and I have been on a roller coaster most of my life. We've
As most sons and their
as
mom.
most sons and their moms do with that dynamic. My mom's very good at listening, and my mom is very good at pointing out what your problems are, why you are where you are, but then mom drops it.
Yeah.
You know, mom's very real, and I'll put it this way, the way I put it now. My mom is my biggest critic, but she's also my biggest advocate right now.
Yeah.
So she's the strongest woman I know. I get a lot of my strength from her, and you know, God willing, she'll be around for quite a lot more years. I really hope so, because I really didn't appreciate that mother-son relationship until just the last few years. Honestly, it's been a blessing. So she is just so happy at where I am, and you know, she enjoys talking about it as much as I do. So.
And so one thing that I'm interested to get into is like, so we talked a little bit about upbringing, the 30 years in between that. Now, coming into where you're open again to Christianity and to God, what were some of those key events that led to it? And I think you have a super cool testimony just to share of how some of these things that only God could have really worked out happened. And so share a little bit about those events leading up to it.
So I guess we'll start probably right in 2020. This was right before the height of COVID. I hadn't been feeling well for a while. My wife made me end up going to the doctor. I ended up going reluctantly, and without all the inner drama of it up to that point, I ended up being, I was taken to the hospital. I got diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic at 50 years old, which is fairly uncommon. And, you know, I'm in this hospital. I have no clue what's going on. They tell me this scenario. They tell me I'm going to be on insulin the rest of my life. And if I even make it out of the hospital. I had both doctors, my endocrinologist and the ER doctors, like, we don't know how you got in here, and we can't believe you're not either in a coma
What was
or what have you.
what was your level again when you went into the
My
hospital?
level was almost at 1,000, my blood sugar level.
And then what is it? What's like the normal?
The normal is probably about 110 to 140.
So
So
yeah, you're about 10 times.
I was about 10
You're about
times
10 times.
Blood
over.
was just a bag of sugar.
Yeah, yeah. So I was in what they call DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, which means my body was shutting down, all my organs, everything was shutting down. They had no idea why I was talking to them, how I was talking to them, but I don't even know what I was. I mean, I was just, I guess, a wreck. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't. Again, I'm going to go back to saying, I honestly think I probably cursed God at that point. I'm like, if you just want to take me, just take me. Why make me go through this? Again, I believe I was being punished. 100%. That was probably the lowest point of my life. I was put in the critical care unit. I spent a week in there. It was strictly for diabetic people.
Yeah.
I think I was the only one in there for 2 or 3 days, and a couple other people came in. But it gave me a lot of time to think and reflect. And honestly, I was just ready to die. I mean, honestly, I was like, just take me. I'm not going through this. I don't deserve to live. Stop making me suffer. I was just ready to go, and I thought I was distant from God before. I really felt like I was distant from him then. There was no inclination that God even cared about me at that point. So I believe it was the third day I was in there, second or third day. A lot of it's a blur still. But my sister came down. She spent the night, the first night I was there. And as I said before, my sister has been a Christian most of her life. And she happened to be talking to her pastor from church, letting him know where I was, what was going on. She was struggling. She wanted the church to pray for me. Pastor John, his name's John Nelson. He actually just told my sister, he's like, hey, I'm going to go see your brother in the hospital. And she's like, okay, if you feel like you need to, but
Because where's he coming from?
he's coming from Delaware. So it's Christ Community Church.
Over an hour.
It's over an hour, yeah.
5 hours.
And so
To come visit someone.
to
he's
come
never
visit
met.
me, I've never met this guy. I don't know who he is, and he's likes to come and he wants to pray. My sister sent me a text, I think, or called me and said, "Hey, my pastor's going to come see you sometime tomorrow." I'm like, whatever, kind of thing. And
Bring out the holy man.
yeah, so
Serious.
yeah, it was serious. So at that point, I didn't really care who was coming in or going. But so the next day, this gentleman shows up out of the blue. Never met him before, again, like I said. And he introduced himself, told me who he was, told me roughly, what my sister had talked to him about. And we just talked for a few minutes. I think he was more just kind of putting me at ease or whatever. And he didn't stay very long, which is fine. I think the nurses came in or something. But he asked if he could pray with me. I said, yeah, why not? I got nothing to lose, right? So, I again, not optimistic or hopeful by any means. So he prayed with me, and then he left. And then the weirdest thing happened. I don't think I've ever been that peaceful in my entire life. My situation didn't change. I was still sitting there. They were still fighting to get my numbers under control. I had no idea what the next day, hour, minute held for me, but I was completely at peace. I'd like to say I don't know why, but I know why now. And the rest of the time, and something, and again, people say this, it wasn't an audible voice to me, but it's just there was something in my head that just said, you're going to be okay. And from there on out, I was in there a few more days, but I gradually got better. And I came out, and here I am, a little over 5 years later. And
So that was
it's a
2020.
blessing. That was 2020.
And then, but you didn't come to Charm City until 2024,
the end of 23.
The end of 23.
Yeah.
And so what happened in between like those 3
So,
years?
I was really good. My wife was really good about restructuring. I basically had to like redo everything in my life. I had to, learn to exercise or, re-exercise in my life, as we call it, eat a lot healthier. I became a much stronger mentally and physically person than I had been in years. But again, I still don't have the Holy Spirit in me. So even though I was better in some aspects, I hadn't changed in others. I was not a very good husband. I was very judgmental. I was very just arrogant. It was all about me. I've always been a selfish person. I didn't care about anybody else or whatever, as long as what I wanted came first. That was in anything I did, whether it was my job, being a father, being a husband, whatever. And it became quite a struggle. I can honestly say, if it wasn't for my wife now, I would not be sitting here. My wife is truly my rock. She has just endured as much pain and suffering as I did. She never left my side. That's a blessing in itself. But it took a toll on her, even though what I was going through, it was by the end of 23, things weren't looking good. I'm pretty sure she would have left by January of 24. That's how bad it was. Yeah. But ironically, about 2 months before that, it was in November, I was scrolling through Facebook one day, and up pops this ad, Charm City Church. Didn't pay much attention to it, but what jumped out at me was, "You belong here." And I'm like, okay. Kept scrolling, and it kept happening. It kept popping up more and more each day for like a week.
That algorithm.
This algorithm, and I'm like, come on, man.
That's where that money's going in.
We know.
Your church money is
we
going
know.
Right
we got to adjust the funds to make that work.
He's here because of you.
But tell them about the name correlation.
Yeah. So going back to Pastor John, so his church, they also refer to his church as C3. Mm-hmm. So when he came there that day, I didn't even realize it at that point, because again, this was way before I'd been involved in our church, and that just kind of stuck with me. And for some reason, one day, I was at our church, and I'm like, C3. I'm like, this is the same guy, and I'm like, this can't be a coincidence. It just can't be.
That's hilarious.
And then it was weird because C3 started popping up like everywhere I saw, like, and I think I shared some stuff with Michael, like license plates and a restaurant or a billboard in Atlantic City or something. It was C3, and I'm like, come on, man. So it was like pulling me. It was calling me.
And so you were seeing all the ads.
I was seeing all the ads. I was seeing, and it would not leave. And there was just something in me. Like, I think probably beginning in November, other than my scenario going through, it was just bleak. I knew divorce was inevitable. I knew I was just going to have to figure out how to start over. And I saw the ad again for C3, and it happened to be for the Thanksgiving service.
Mm-hmm. Right, so tell the whole story.
So this was a week
tell
before.
The whole story.
This was a week before. So reluctantly, I told my wife, and we talked very little at that point. This was the week before Thanksgiving, before our Thanksgiving service, or the Thanksgiving service, and I said, I'm going out. And she was like, whatever. And
she doesn't know where you're going? Or
she didn't know where I was going.
Okay.
No. She did not know where I was going.
Where do you think she thought you were going?
I don't. It definitely wasn't church. I can tell you that.
The bar.
No,
Casino.
The bar. Casino maybe. Bar,
yeah.
It definitely was not church.
Yeah. The church would have been wasn't on their bingo card.
So
no, it was not on there. It was not on there.
Did you burn it down?
Okay,
so I actually
you sneakily go.
I snuck I snuck myself to C3. I parked in the parking lot. I parked on the side, and I sat in my car. And it was 6:45, 7 o'clock, 7:15. Still didn't get out of my car. I think I got out once and like just kind of stood there. I was like, I'm like, I can't go in these doors.
You're lucky Austin was on the security team.
I know.
I cannot,
Austin would have had you in a headlock.
And the funny thing about that was your sister was there, and she remembered. She's like, I remember when you came there, you like stood by your car, but you would not come in. Like I didn't even remember that. She was keeping an eye on
like,
me.
who the heck is this
So
I think I
some
had to walk out to
creeper.
our car that night.
Yeah. Hence we started security not long thereafter. But so actually, I got in my car and I actually left because it just. I gotta get my thing. So yeah. I just left. I was like, I just do not have the strength to go in there. I left probably like 7:30.
Okay.
Because by then it was like I'd missed most of it anyway, or half of it. They're not gonna miss me anyway.
Yeah.
So the next week came, which was a Thanksgiving service, and I actually made it in the building that night.
I was impressed.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was like, I was not comfortable being there. I stood in the back of the room. You know exactly where I sat for probably 3 months.
Oh yeah, easily.
I never moved. I never said a word. I would say hi to somebody if they came out to me, but I got to say I got to give myself credit for being there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't me.
Right.
There was somebody higher driving.
Yeah.
But I was there because I had nowhere else to go. I had nothing left to turn to. And I just can't explain why I kept, or what made me go back the next week. I can now, but back then I could not. And
I remember talking to you every week because I would go around and say hi to you. And you'd always be nice, but it was just like very short. It was like, hey, good to see you. And like that was it. And I remember talking to other people because that was in the beginning of our church.
Sure.
And I was thinking, this guy's never coming back. Like I literally thought at the end of every week, this guy's never coming back.
Yep.
And then you just kept coming back, and I was like, why is he coming back? That was my second question. Why does he keep coming back? And then I remember, and you would never say this, but this is a story that's ingrained for me of you, was it was in that first couple weeks that you were there, we were raising money for a camera. And we were raising money for the camera that we're literally using to shoot some of this right now. And we were like, hey, you know, we need $3,000 for this camera. And from that, you know, we were down. We needed like another.
We were down like
we needed another
$2,000.
$2,000. And I just remember you coming up to me, and you handing me this envelope, and you're like, "Hey, God told me to give this to you." And I was like, "Okay." And then I didn't open it obviously until you left, and I saw it. You give $1,000 to that camera. And then I learned later that you weren't even a Christian. And I was like, what is this guy? Who is this guy? This is the most interesting guy I've ever met in my life.
Oh my
He just
gosh.
felt God, but it seems like
You don't need to be a Christian
you
for
could
God to speak to you.
You could see God is speaking to you throughout your life, even before, you know, you surrendered to Him.
100%.
So talk about that time between when you first got to Charm City and then when you surrendered. So
it's funny because, like you said, I wasn't a believer then, but I need to know what I'm getting into before I'm going to dive in. So you want to talk about like figuring you guys out and like where you're going and what this mission of this church and all is. That was a good 3 months for me, just to figure out like. And again, I wasn't a Christian. I didn't, and it was weird. Like, I don't even know why I kept coming back. I'm like, I just need to know more. Like, there's something here with these guys. And
How long was it until you told your wife you started going to church? Like,
I think it
how
was
long-
probably after the first month. I don't think I told her the first couple times. I might have said something on
going to
it.
church.
Yeah.
He's like, it lowered him down on his
Yeah,
scale.
yeah. She would have never bought where I'm going. If I'm like, yeah, I'm going to
Oh, you're
church,
going
she'd
to
been
church.
like,
You're right.
whatever. She'd be like,
He probably would have thought, like, you're cheating on me or something. Like,
yeah,
there's no way
definitely,
you're going to church.
100%.
You say
100%. And it was, yeah, but that time, like I said, God was just calling me. He just kept calling me like each and every week. And I think after probably 2 months, maybe, or whatever, then that's when you and I started to meet. And we were meeting like once a week. And that probably went on for another month.
Yeah.
And I still wasn't a believer. And we would
I remember
meet.
we were talking about the same thing.
We were talking about the same
every coffee
thing.
meeting.
And this went on. It was just crazy. And Mike was like, why are you not like,
I was
Are
like,
you
"You're
not-
doing everything?"
you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, but you're not a Christian. That's not the way like this normally works. He's like, first you usually become a Christian, then you want to be involved because, God's change and do all this. I'm like, yeah, well, that's not the way, this is how it's going to work. So, and that went on. And then finally in February of 24, we were meeting for coffee, and I think Michael just came out. He's just like, what are you waiting for? He's like, do you believe this and this and this? He's like, I know you do. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And he's like, well, then that's it or whatever. I'm like, what do you mean that's it? He's like, just surrender. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, that's literally it. He's like, what are you fighting for or fighting against? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's just like, okay, well, this is it. Like, and I mean, at that time, then there was a moment of clarity. It's just like, this is the answer I was waiting for. But I think if I would have tried to jump in earlier on than that and didn't wait my 3 or 4 months to really be able to say, yeah, this is where I belong, it wouldn't have fit. It had to be in the right time. It had to be, again, I'm going to say in my time because I was still structuring my life at that point in time. But after that, and after I surrendered, it was just, it's amazing just how everything else just kind of fell into place, more so than I ever thought. I would have never thought that I'd be sitting on this couch today talking to you guys.
100%.
I mean, at 100%, at the very best, it was like, okay, I'll at least go to church, and maybe I'll just be a better person. My wife would be super happy with that. If I wasn't just ignorant and arrogant every night I came home, maybe she'll stick around for a little while or longer, and I'll figure the rest as I go. I mean, that's kind of that's the attitude that I have. There was no intention in my mind of ever getting saved or anything. So, but hey, that's how the Holy Spirit works. That's how God works. God knows what you need when you need it, even before you do. So, yeah, it's funny. I'm glad you remember some of that stuff because I forget most of it.
I remember it all. And I think that it comes down to when God's working in someone's life, like the more that you just bring them to Christ and allow them to see the gospel, eventually it's going to sink in. I think that sometimes we can pressure people into making a decision that they're not necessarily ready for at that moment, but they make that decision and then they go and they act like they didn't make any decision because they didn't really, it was an emotional response to some call that you were making, rather than allowing people to just hear the gospel continually and saying, hey, like when you're ready, just take this step with God. And God, because God was always working in your life, clearly.
100%.
And calling you to that moment even. And even in the hospital, when you weren't saved, you still felt peace because God was still talking to you, saying that you were going to be okay because he knew this moment was going to come 3 years later, 4 years later, that you were going to come back to him as his son. It's just awesome to see, like, just God working in that way. And so, like, one thing that you've obviously grown a lot from that moment, especially within the church, from going from being saved to diving into small groups and serving to then becoming a leader in serving and set up and tear down and now becoming a deacon. And so, like, all of these steps, what have you seen in your relationship with God, some of the biggest ways that Christ has changed you?
So for me, it's it's just given me everything that I never had before. Um, it's given me empathy. It's given me sympathy. It's given me grace. Just compassion towards others, and compassion and wanting to help and serve, and not out of selfish reasons. It's giving me biblical structure on how to be a good father, how to be a good husband, how to be an integral part of a church that we have. And it's like every day I just ask for clarity on what God, where do you want me this day? Every day is different. Every day I grow in some way, and I try not to keep wanting to hold on so much to certain things, because it's really hard, being not getting saved till you're older in life. I'm 55 years old now, so a lot of people at my age have either got saved really young and maybe been in the church for a really long time, or maybe aren't in the church at all right now. I still have a lot of friends. I've been in construction my whole life. I know a lot of the same guys I've known for most of my adult life, and they're still struggling with things and all. And I'm like, any chance I get.
What do they think about your?
It's funny because it wasn't like the first 6 months or so, but probably after the first year, the people I was coming up through, just in my adult life with, they're like, I don't know what it is about you, but there's something this is not the Greg that I remember 30 some years ago.
You're happy now.
I'm happy. I'm like,
what's up with that?
Yeah, they're like, and these guys are like, what is wrong with you? And how many times I got that? But it's funny because some of the other guys who have actually, turned their life around too, they know why. Mm-hmm. And they've called me, or they said, hey, we're so happy for you. We're doing this thing or whatever. And I can see it working in their life as well, which is, for me, that really just resonates with me, because when I see people who are struggling the way I did, and there's people in our own church who I've really become good friends with, and things that they're really struggling with some stuff, and they're about the same age as me, some a little younger, some a little older, or whatever, but we connect. And just to know that there's somebody out there who's willing to just step up and be like, man, I know where you're at, or I know where you've been through, and how can I help? And sometimes they just need somebody to listen, because they felt like I did. They felt like God wasn't listening, that God's not hearing them, or they're being punished too. And I can, I can say, hey, man, I've been there. He is with you through everything, and you just have to take you out of it. You have to completely surrender, and that's where you're going to see the change.
One thing that I find interesting when you're talking about feeling like you were being punished by God, where do you think that came from? Like, why do you think you believe that about God? Because of the church you grew up in, or because of your family? What was the...
I think it was probably a little of both. Being raised Baptist, they're not very forgiving when it comes to things. I mean, it's fire and brimstone. You're going to hell there's literally no compassion. You just feel like if you don't walk this line every single day, that God's going to damn you no matter what. Yeah. And that's not the way it is. And I think that's what, and not just with that religion. I mean, it happens with a lot of different ones, but I think when you have that engraved in early stages of your life, and just the family structure I grew up in, it was very difficult, with a single mom and I didn't have much structure. I kind of did what I wanted, but I paid the consequences for that, because I didn't have that structure. And I think had I had a little more structure growing up, things might have changed differently, but I got no regrets. I just think that, people get a misconception about church or religion, and what I tell people is this. I'm like, look, do I belong to a church? I do, because this is my home, but I don't follow a religion. I follow Jesus. And that's what being a Christian is to me. Religion throws a lot of people off in a lot of things. And I think just when you say that dynamic, I think it immediately turns people off like that. But when you immediately just say, no, I follow Christ, and this is what Christ teaches, and this is what I believe because of him. And I'm, we teach through the Bible, this is the way it is. So when you back it up with fact, I think it takes a lot of the misconception out of it from the religious standpoint. And I think that resonates with people because people nowadays, I think, really want things to be real. They want things to be grounded. They don't want this big gray area anymore. They want to, I think people lack that in just life in general. And I think that when you're convicted enough to say, this is where I stand and this is where I believe, I think people applaud that. I think they listen to you more instead of just being, oh, whatever you want to do. Yeah.
That is something I will say is that, I'm not 55. I've spent probably over half my life now in the church, I'd say. And it's not a long life, but still half of it. And working in food service, you rub shoulders with a lot of interesting characters. Just a lot of them all the time. And
do you want to give a shout out
to Waffle House?
There you go. Give a shout out.
Come on now.
You might get promoted from this.
I just might. Don't look me up on LinkedIn, please.
Get that gold waffle pin.
Yeah,
yeah,
I have one.
a waffle pin for promo.
Dude,
for a podcast.
we need to have like a C3 collab.
Come on,
Waffle House.
I'm all about it.
So, I remember people always think that like, oh, working at Chick-fil-A, like you have to like have your pastor sign like a certificate saying that you like go to a church before you can work at a Chick-fil-A.
No one thinks that about Waffle House.
No one thinks that about Waffle House. I'm pretty sure they tried to issue me a pack of Newports when I first signed on.
That's awesome. Want to see your dental records?
If you have all your teeth, you're overqualified. You're overqualified.
No, I was able to get in because these are fake, so I was able to get on that.
All right.
But I remember like working at Chick-fil-A. They talk about Chick-fil-A's for like the white straight man. I've never seen a more like diverse group of LGBT individuals in my entire life than when I was working at Chick-fil-A. Like I'm pretty sure they like specifically hired them just to throw off the scent from what the owner was saying. There was so many gay people that I was working with, and they loved me.
I'm just curious of where this is going.
There's
got to be a point somewhere
because
we're hooked now. Though.
Because the whole thing that Greg's talking about is like people want to be able just to like know that you're real.
Yeah.
And know that like it's not just about like I'm just trying to fluff myself up for the sake of religion.
Yeah.
Because I would just tell them very blatantly, just like they would walk up to me and be like, "Hey, you're studying to be a pastor. What does the Bible say about this?" I'm like, "It says this." I'm like, "No, being gay is a sin." Like, yeah, that's real. Like I'll tell it to their face. Like, I don't care. You're gonna hold hands with your girlfriend in front of me. I don't care, dude. But you know what I'm also gonna do? I'm gonna give you a hug. I'm I'm not like I was like trying to plan double dates with some of these people. With me and my fiance at the time, or my wife when we got married. I was just trying to plan that stuff because I was like, I'm not gonna be afraid of you guys trying to like, I don't know, like one up me or like try to be big dog on me. Like we'll make him say his true thoughts or something that they were trying to do. It's like no. And for some people, when they first get introduced to me and they find out that, like, yes, I am a very, very religious person. And for them that, like, they hear that and it really rubs them the wrong way. But then you're just open and honest with them. Of just like, I just follow the Lord Jesus Christ. I just love Jesus. And because of that, I love you too. And I really want you to come to my church. I really want you to feel the love that God has for you. And I'm not doing this for any sort of agenda. Like, I'm just going to live my life. And I want you to live a similar life with me because I think you'd be a really great addition to the family of God, but I'm not going to sit here and pester you about every little thing you're doing. I got enough sins of my own to focus on. I don't need to worry about you. So I think when people see that and hear that, I remember I got called by this one lady. She was just a very like outgoing lesbian, and she would always call me her favorite little conservative. That was a little pet name for me. She was like 20 years older than I was. And it's you rub shoulders with enough people to where you can actually like satiate them with the gospel, and you can like totally saturate them with the message of the gospel, that it no longer becomes this thing of, oh, this, here goes this guy again. He's just gonna sit here and just start talking about all this stuff from the Bible. He's no care about what I'm gonna say, from his 16 King James.
Yeah.
He's gonna actually sit and listen to me, and listen to my problems and talk about my problems. I had this really, really nice, like expensive ESV Bible that I had. It was like a reader's edition. It had like no chapter and verse markings. It was very, very it's prestigious. And I remember I was just sitting there reading at work one time, and this one guy just starts talking to me again. He was also just another flamboyant individual of the LGBT community. And he's just like talking to me about the Bible, about these things. And he's like, I want to learn more about God. Tell me what I should do to learn more about God. I put a bookmark in Romans, and I just said, read that. I was like, just figure it out. And this Bible was like almost $100. And he just starts crying because he's just like, he never thought that someone from the church would actually just be nice enough just to like give him something, like give them an ear, a time of day, just their friendship. He and I had gone on, breakfast dates and whatever, because I just was opening myself up to just having honest conversations and being real with people. And when people experience what Greg experienced of his grandfather stomping, clapping, shouting, and then turn around, get in the car, I said, sit! And, like, being all mean. Be nice to your kids when you go to church. They remember that. And so I think if more people were like that, we'd see more people like Greg.
So, like, I'm curious, if you were going to speak to someone who is going through something similar to what you were going through as far as their viewpoint of God, like, what would you tell them? Like, what advice would you give them?
I'd have to say just stop trying. Just stop trying. No matter what age you are or what stage in your life, we're human, right? We want to fix things. We want to try. We keep wanting to try until we just fail even more. I would say, look, just stop. Turn it over to God. God is real. God is listening. He's always there. He will not forsake you. All he asks is that you trust in him and that you believe he sent his son to die for you. And once you accept that, it's endless. I mean, the blessings in your life will be endless. And at that point, then you can stop trying to fix things before you bring them to God. Yeah. That's what we do as humans, right? And the one thing I've learned is, like, God does not care what you've done. You can go to God at any stage in your life and anything that you've done, and he does not care. And part of me before was like, I think I have to, like, I can't go to God the way I am now. I'm not right. Like, I'm just not the right individual for God. This is not a good fit. And like, I got to fix myself first. Then God will love me more, or maybe he'll be more accepting of me. And I remember this one time, a friend of mine, she goes to another church, pretty big church around us. Everybody knows who it is. But anyway, we were friends through work. We were friends through work for a long time. She kept trying to get me to go to church. And I remember one time I was struggling, my wife and I, and her and her husband, I was friends with both of them. And they did some like counseling through church or whatever. And I went over to them one night. I was just at my wit's end. I didn't know what to do. And I'm talking to them, and they're just kind of guiding me and giving me some advice and things. And I think I remember saying to her, I was like, maybe one day if I ever become a Christian, things will just be so much easier. Mm. And she like laughed at me and she's like, what are you even talking about? And I'm like, every Christian that I see is like happy. They got like no problems. And wherever she's like, you truly do not know Christianity very well. She's like, that's the furthest thing. And then she proceeded to tell me, it's like, when you finally do, that's when the work starts. That's when it's hard. Because when you're living,
Greg watched Joel Osteen growing up.
yeah, no, I did not. Thank
He
God.
wants to take your
But
problems.
yeah, no, we do not want
Hide your
that.
money in the walls.
But I trusted her opinion and all, and she just hit me with this. I'm like, what are you saying? You're a Christian, and she's like, but you don't understand. Like when you become a Christian, that's when it's the hard stuff starts, because then you have to let go of everything that's worldly or earthly or manly, and just you have to trust in God for everything. And people are going to persecute you. They're going to rip you apart. They're going to judge you. They're going to hate you because you're believing in something that nobody can see. She's like, and you got to be strong enough to withstand that. And I was like, well, man, I didn't know all that was involved. So I think that kind of maybe do a quick turnaround and maybe do a retreat for another few years till I really got the concept down. But
because then at that time it would be like a decision you made for you. It wasn't a decision out of like surrender to God. It was a decision that like what's gonna best help Greg right now.
Exactly.
It would have been, yeah.
Exactly. And again, I was still in that stage of me. I was like, I think I went there to just be like, just tell me what I need to do. Like, how do I get through this? I don't even think I went there, looking for anything with Christianity. I just knew that they were married. They were friends of mine. They were together a long time. And, they proceeded to tell me, they're like, look, where you are right now, like with your wife in this dynamic, he's like, we were there a couple years ago. Like, we were literally sitting at our dining room table, hating each other. And he had a checkbook out ready to say, how much do you want to like just get out? Let's just get out. And they told me, and this was after I'm like, I didn't need to know all this. I mean, I thought you guys looked good on the outside, you know what I mean? But that's when, and I see people now, in church and just friends of mine at work, and I hate to see them struggle. I just hate, and sometimes it's just like, look, you just want to talk, just talk. Because sometimes that's all people need, Oh, look, I'm not here to preach to everybody. I know what we have as Christians may not be for everybody. It is in God's eyes. They just may not be ready yet. And that's fine. But the way I look at it is, I might be that one person that day that's going to keep that person from going over the edge or keep them from doing something stupid. And it might just be saying, hey, you all right today? Mm-hmm. Something I can do for you? I would have never had that before.
It seems like a lot of your turnaround came from your view of God being different than it was growing up. How you thought God was always punishing you. And you experienced God once you experienced God's love for you. And it's just like similar to David when, the things that he's done and with the murder and adultery and lack of faith. And then he loses his son, and then he's being chased by his other son, and even through all of that, he's called a man after God's own heart. And even in the Psalms, he's asking God to search me, like know my most inward thoughts. Like that guy feels comfortable to go to God, despite what he's done. And the same, I feel like that is like the place God got you to. That helped you
100%.
Yeah, turn around.
Yeah, absolutely. And both you and Andrew really helped me get a good grasp on that. You really showed me God in a different light. That he really it didn't matter, what I did or who I was. That he really truly did love me, and that was the first time in my life that anybody broke it down that way to me. That I was like, I don't have to be ashamed of anything. And it's when you know that and you believe that, I think that opens a whole lot of doors for people. I really think it starts to let them heal from the inside, and people need that. They need to know that they are or and can be forgiven, because we fall short every single day. I do it, I'll probably go home tonight and mess up or whatever. But, but my wife sees a huge change in me. And that to me is just, it was worth the fight. It really was.
Yeah,
I would do it all over again.
Like A.W. Tozer says that what you believe about God is the most important thing about you. And in the same way, like you had to meet a God that you had not known yet. And that's the thing, like I was reading another book today where it talks about, if you know God and how you currently know him, but if you still struggle with these other things, it could be anything with addiction to pride to anger. Well, then the reality is you need to meet a God that you don't know yet who can help you through those things. Because right now, like you know God maybe intellectually, but you haven't experienced God. And so maybe like you had to meet a God that you hadn't known yet for yourself.
Right.
Like you may have heard the gospel growing up. You probably did it here and there, but you didn't know that God. And so I think that's huge that's huge advice for anyone to know, like maybe the God that we're talking about, the God of the Bible, and aspects of him you just haven't met yet. Like you don't know yet for yourself.
Right.
Or worse, you think you know him.
Or you think
Right.
you know him.
Based upon experiences and past interactions you've had with people that said they knew him.
Right.
Yeah.
So you think you know.
Yeah, or
what
you think
know.
you know
Right.
God. That's not
100%.
the God of the Bible. It's not biblical Jesus. It's what you've projected onto Jesus.
That's almost
from
worse
other
than just not
people.
knowing him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
to a point.
people
Absolutely.
do that, though. I mean, that's just a common thing. I'm sure it was part of your life, and that
Oh, sure.
you projected onto God what other people did who said they were followers of Christ.
Sure.
Because if you say you follow him, then obviously
Sure.
I'm just going to say that's what he's like.
Right. Right.
Because
And you would judge them
and
for
you
that.
judge
And,
them,
yeah.
and you judge God. And so,
Yep.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, how difficult has it been? Because I mean, like me and Michael put our ages together. We're still not as old as
Oh,
you were.
we know.
So, like, with that like in mind, like you lived a whole lifetime before you got saved.
Yeah.
I mean, pre-colonial America, you're ancient.
I know
So,
it. I know it.
like, what does it feel like to start a whole new life after you've already lived one?
That's actually pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty
I'm not
deep,
gonna lie.
Andrew.
I
That's
didn't
pretty
know,
deep,
like,
Andrew.
Sometimes I don't know where you land it. That was good.
He landed it. He landed
You got
it.
a whole new life after you lived one. That's a good quote.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been exciting. I mean, I think at first it was a little overwhelming. But when I started I really had to let a lot of things go, even after I became saved, just for myself, so that I wouldn't kind of backslide. I wanted to make sure that this path that I was going to continue to grow each and every day. And a lot of that came down to, I had to forgive myself first. There was, you do a lot of things in 50 some years of your life that half of them you don't remember, but I really had to let that go in order to let the Holy Spirit really just envelop me from the inside, just to get rid of this old stuff and allow room for this new stuff. And I do that every single day. I mean, that's part of my prayers every day. It's just like, look, just let me let go of something that's negative, whether it's my past or so I can make room for something that you have to give me today. Or, let me be a blessing to somebody today, or whatever it happens to be.
Would you say it's pretty normal for you to like feel like you have to like consistently like remind yourself like, God forgave me of this, I can let it go?
I've gotten much better at it. It's a little harder to get other people in my life to follow that concept, because people,
Just tell them God forgave you.
yeah, and I do,
easy,
I
Greg.
do that. People, but as humans, right? We hold grudges. We like to hold grudges for a very long time, me included. Like I was all about like, I don't care. I'll take this to my grave and I'll sleep tomorrow night, not worrying about what you think about me.
Yeah.
But people who aren't saved in your life, because I got plenty of people in my life that aren't saved, that are in my family or close friends and all. And, things come up and you can just see it with them, and they keep waiting for what I'll call the old Greg to come back out. And I'm like, I'm not that guy anymore. And I always say it. I'm like, he forgave me. Maybe you should too.
Mm.
And I got no qualms about saying that. So
Don't you know your old self was crucified with Christ?
Yeah.
yeah,
Put out the
so
old self. And that's the
they'll
thing
get
about
it.
Greg that's also really awesome to see is that when you have someone that's truly converted, you will see life change. Like if someone's truly converted and following Jesus, you will see life change, and you have seen tremendous life change from Greg. I'm sure like your
Appreciate
wife has seen it,
yeah,
and you've said that.
Yep.
And so
great.
I hope that this conversation, I really think it will be beneficial to people who may have gone through similar upbringings, even people who may have lived a life before their new life, who can see that there's still another life that they can have in Christ. And, yeah, well, their life that they've already lived, they can now have new life in Christ. And so I think it'll just be, I think your story is really encouraging. It's encouraging to me, too, to see, because you put a lot of time in ministry, and sometimes you wonder, what are we doing this for? Is it making a difference? And then
I still remember like it was yesterday. You put in the Slack, Greg got saved.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, ah.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, God moved. It's just like you go through ministry and you're like, man, is this making a difference? Are we doing what God's even called us to do? And then when you see life stories like Greg happen, you're like, that's why like God's called us to this ministry, is so that we can be a participant in his plan to share the gospel with others.
Absolutely. You guys have been a blessing in my life, trust me.
So thanks for coming on and sharing.
Yeah,
your
thanks for
story.
having me. I appreciate it. Anytime.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on the Charm City Church podcast. God bless you. We love you. We'll see you next time.